before. But if we look at the history of instruments and development of instruments, all the time we have this element of experimentation, and so first which come to my mind is the experiments with wind capsule on wind instruments, like when you have a shawm, and if you play the shawm, the reed is, you know, it's the same like in modern oboe. You have the all instruments in orchestra playing like beautifully and have nothing around them, and then you have the oboist with a lot of different kind of stuff, and after the every phrase it's doing something with their reed, and so on. So the musicians in medieval period start to use a wind capsule which cover reed, which add a very which transforms the sound to the very nasal sound and very loud sound. So if you look at the Kramhorn or Rauschpfeife, it's a typical instruments from this family, and it's definitely not the direction of making a beautiful sound. It's the direction of like making playing an instrument convenient and making an instrument loud, which was very typical to medieval aesthetics in music. But when we go to more recent times, and if we look at the works by Claudio Monteverdi, we have this Combattimento di Tancredi e Clorinda, and what we have in this work. So it was the same situation, like the musicians played on their instruments with bows and everything was fine, and suddenly Monteverdi came up with idea, but let's track the instruments with bow and use a pizzicato, and to change the quality of sound. And really, so this like the 17th century we could recognize at the beginning of this path, when the composers tried to find a new colors and new timbres quality of the sound during the playing on instruments, because we could again mention Heinrich Bieber, who already in 17th century used the preparation of the instruments. And for example, in the fragment of the Battaglia, he really did a lot of crazy experiments. He did a lot of crazy scordaturas on string instruments, where he tuned like the bass strings to where he changed the strings on their places, because he looking to more nasal or more booming kind of sound. And here in this example he used paper to prepare strings on bass viola to get the sound which reminds us sound of distant snare drum, and it sounds like that. So it's really interesting how we could find in 17th century already this tendency to experiment or have these prepared instruments for achieving new sound quality on playing on instruments. And so if we go back to this emphasis on new sound, we have the extended techniques, but then we have the use of electronic and synthetic instruments. And of course, if we talk about electronic instruments, then what we could have, definitely it's 20th century. There could be no other questions. Okay, we have the late 19th century, the musical telegraph, the first electronic music instruments, but it's still the late 19th century, so definitely not before. But if we look deeper, we could find in 18th century the Czech inventor Václav Prokopievič built an instrument which used static electric energy from Leyden jars, which was used on instruments, some kind of clavecin, some kind of harpsichord, and we don't know exactly how these instruments work, but probably it was something similar to this instrument by Jean-Baptiste de Laborde, which was called the clavecin électrique. And so here is a modern replica of the instrument. And so we have the keyboard, which was, so down here the Leyden jars was placed. So the as you know, the Leyden jars with the early form of batteries from 18th century, and so it was it used a feature which sometimes is called the lightning bells or Franklin bells. So when you have this, like the two bells and the small metal ball which is disconnected by some kind of isolator from these two bells. So when there are the static electricity, the ball receives the different kind of charge from the bell, and it is it been attracted to one of the bell, when you touch the bell, it immediately receives the same type of charge because the bell is much bigger. And then it repels this small ball, and it goes to the another bell, and then the cycle repeated. So we have a constant type of tremolo, very fast tremolo, and it's very steady. So it's really interesting that these musicians used electricity in 18th century to build an instrument which could produce some kind of sound which is really difficult to replicate in real life, because if you want to have this, like the long steady note of very quick tremolo, it's difficult to perform it via hand, and especially if you want to use for the chords, and this is like another example of experiments with sound, and even with electricity, with new electric instruments, already in the second half of 18th century. But then we have like the ultimate question. But okay, we have some experiments with electricity, with rhythm, with timbre, with dissonance, but there was definitely no microtonal music before 20th century. But let's listen to these fragments by Nicolas. Beautiful sound, very beautiful. Now we have a little bit similar to Gesualdo's, this chromatics kind of texture. Now something very strange happened. Are they singing false? Like false notes? Not in tune?
Well, either this is one of my tuning from the time, so either they use it or it's very hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
If you can read, or do you know those guys? Because best reference is Georgian music, folk music, which is full of reference to those signs, and then it's really something.
Okay, this is strange. Like on the beginning they sang.
Ciekawe pytanie, czy nie stroją, czy tak ma być, czy...
They sang so beautifully, and at the end something going on with tuning.
Michał, stroi czy nie stroi? To co leciało teraz. Nie, bo wydaje mi się, że stroi, skoro usnął, także myślę, że jak ktoś ma, no tak mi się wydaje, chociaż Michał jesteś na perkusji nie urażając, bo to w ogóle najgorsze, co mogę zrobić w tym momencie. Ale to ciekawy temat, bo cały czas mnie to męczy. Na którymś koncercie było, chyba, nie będę mówił jakim, ale chyba w pierwszy dzień festiwalu mieliśmy te dylematy, wiecie Państwo? Czy to jest skomponowane, tak? I czy też instrument nie stroi? No i potem się okazało, że jednak było skomponowane, wiecie? Znaczy, to się potem na referacie, na wykładzie, którym kompozytor miał, on to wytłumaczył, ale to znaczy, to jest problem pewnego dyskomfortu, w który wchodzimy. No tak, no bo muzycy, zwłaszcza słucham absolutem, na przykład nagle coś odjeżdża, no to oni się męczą, także ja się cieszę, że nie mam absolutu, bo to właśnie z tego powodu jest potem problem troszeczkę, nie? Kiedyś rozmawialiśmy.
Tak.
So,
what we have here, so this is a period of Renaissance composers, and of course in Renaissance composers all artists tend to recreate an antiquity and vision of antiquity, try to recreate, as we know, they try to recreate a Greek drama, and then they create an opera, and when they read theoretical texts about music from ancient Greek times, they found that all modes have three types or three genus. One is diatonical, another one is chromatical, and another one is enharmonic. And in enharmonic genus, in some modes in ancient Greece, there was a distance approximately like 1/8 of a tone or even smaller. So in this Greek theory there was this fourth, the quarta, which stayed the same at the same notes, and the two notes in between could have a very different ratio to these two notes. And if we combining this one quarta, one tetrachord with another tetrachord, we could have multiple kinds of modes, multiple kinds of scales, and if there are chromatic, and especially if there are enharmonic type of tetrachords, then it was of course microtonal. And what is very interesting, that this name genus was translated in Arabic literature as jins, and today, if we look on the theory how the maqams are created, the basis is the jins. So it is very interesting that we describe a Western European music as a music which are created on the basis of antiquity tradition, but at the same time the music of the Northern Africa, what we call the Middle East, is also created on the same tradition of Greek antiquity. And even the terms stick the same. So what did these Renaissance composers try to do? So they tried to recreate this third type of enharmonic mode with distances between pitches smaller by one semitone. And this is very important to remember, that at that time there was no equal temperament. And if we look at the temperament of that times, which was long before even well tempered temperament, which is still very dissonant. I don't know if you listen to Bach pieces performed in original temperament, even in well tempered temperament, it's much more dissonant than in contemporary equal temperate temperament system. So especially if there are like this chromatic kind of scales, they sound really very harsh. So at that period, usually if you look at the semitones in every tone of the scale, you have one semitone which is a little bit smaller and another one which is a little bit wider. And Vicentino divided these semitones on different parts. He divided it on the parts which he called diesis, and he divided the diatonic semitone, which was wider semitone, into 3 diesis, and chromatic semitone, which was a smaller one, into 2 diesis. So in Vicentino theory, every tone was divided into fifths diesis. So we have the not quarter tone but 1/5 tone structure, and it was like the theoretical basis for recreation of this enharmonic type of modes. And what was the practical use of that? So at that time we have not only the theory and the practical implementation of this theory in choir music, but also in instrumental music. And probably you are familiar with name archicembalo. So we have like, okay, we have cembalo. What is archicembalo? And if you look at the museums of old instruments, you could find that there are instruments where the keyboard is divided. There are few notes in octave, or even all notes in octave are not the full key, but keys are like constructed from few parts. And this is exactly the parts responsible for this different kind of micro tuning. And here it's a very nice example on
looking.
So this is Elam Rotem and the early music sources channel, and they have a beautiful website where they analyze works by Emilio de Cavalieri. And in original manuscript of the work we have this very strange like dots and lines near the notes, which indicates this like smaller than half tones deviations from this harmonic this chromatic scale, which indicates its enharmonic scale. And if we listen to this,
For the right tools to understand this division of the tone, let's see how Vicentino divided it and put the enharmonic intervals into practice. According to conventions of the time, the tone can be divided into two unequal parts, one chromatic semitone and one diatonic semitone. This is the standard chromatic division of the tone in the 16th century, as opposed to nowadays, where with the equal temperament all the semitones are equal. So if we apply this to Cavalieri's first ending, we have a chromatic semitone and then a bigger diatonic semitone. Let's listen.
so here
Vicentino
we clearly
divided
could
these semitones
hear the
further
difference
into
between
smaller
semitones.
intervals called dieses. In the chromatic semitone there are 2 dieses, and in the bigger diatonic semitone there are 3. While we cannot be sure how Cavalieri saw the division of the tone, here is how his enharmonic passage is applied in Vicentino's division. And this is how it sounds. Interestingly, when Vicentino describes the enharmonic
Here I need to mention that it is performed on the modern replica of the Cavalieri organ, which was created on the same basis like the archicembalo, so where the keyboards are divided.
music, he connects it to sweetness, dolce e soave. But when Cavalieri utilizes it, he uses it in the opposite context of bitterness and harshness. In addition to this theoretical discussion, Vicentino also describes new keyboard instruments that could play the notes of his system, thereby serving as a foundation for the performance of polyphonic enharmonic music. Here in Basel, we are lucky to have access to the reconstructed enharmonic organ of Vicentino. There is much to say about this organ and what it can do, but for now, thanks to the fact that it has an enharmonic division of each tone, we can try and play Cavalieri's little enharmonic passage. Let's listen to Alice and Johannes.
This is very interesting that at that time, in the theory of composition, the very important was that music should describe emotions of the text. And if the text is about pleasure and love, the music should be beautiful. But if the text is about pain, struggles, death, the music couldn't be beautiful. The music should represent all the harshness of the text, and exactly what we could see in these works and many other works of the composers from that period, like the work by Scipione La Corcia, is this harshness of music in the moments where the text is about unpleasant, let's say, things. And so for me it was a very interesting discovery that what we have since almost the beginning of professional composition, Western European tradition, it's composers all the times tend to find something new in music, and all the times we have these three elements. We have experimental composers, we have very conservative composers, and we have some composers which are in between, like Lully, who try to use already quite developed elements of from experimental composers and combine it with some still living conservative tradition. And yeah, okay. So and what is really really interesting for me here is that if we look at all this tradition, we could unlock this, and also we could unlock the tendency for this like atonal movement of 20th century by understanding the tuning systems. So, and exactly the tuning systems of the epoch, it's the answer for this. For example, the tuning system which we just looked at in Renaissance period gives the composers possibility to have this very big range of emotions and possibility to create really harsh and dense dissonant feeling in music, which was completely erased when the music moved to temperament systems which are almost equally temperate, or when we have the equal temperament system. So then we have the same evolution. If we remember what I one slide was a slide with Haydn quartet. You know, everything is very clear, very beautiful, and it was something new at that time. But if we look just, I don't know, 20 years after Haydn, the music was not so clear anymore. And if we go through the whole 19th century, we see the tendency of appearing more and more chromaticism in music. And I think it was exactly because like music systems move from this unequal temperament to equal temperament, and the chromaticism was an answer to have a possibility of this bigger emotional range in music. And if we look at this tendency, it was very natural that on the beginning of 20th century, suddenly we have a lot of composers who want to compose quarter tone music. And we have all these experiments like a lot of pieces by Charles Ives with quarter tones, like these quarter tone pianos, and you know, a lot of very well known composers also experiments with this possibility of smaller divisions of the scale than the half tones. And this is very interesting, that the evolution of electronic instruments are also tightly connected to these experiments with smaller divisions of the tone. And if we look at the development of ondes Martenot or on the development of Trautonium, the boss were mentioned as instruments which have possibility to freely divide an octave to any as many parts as you want, and it so the electronic instruments of the late 20s and the 30s, 30s and 40s was an answer to this search for the smaller divisions of the tone. And it is very interesting that when now we think about microtonal music, we tend to start it like from, okay, we have a spectralism, and definitely the spectralism is very connected to like to this microtonal scheme. But it is very interesting that the very fact of the evolution of electronic instruments in 20s and 30s were connected to the experimental scene and experiments with tuning. Okay, so that's it. That was all the facts which I collected during last years of my research on some interesting things, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there was some questions. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
Are you, or were you during preparation for this lecture, interested in existence of things like microtonality, polyrhythms, extended vocal and instrumental techniques outside of what you call the Western European tradition?
Yes, and so this is also on the beginning of lecture, or no, in the middle. Marek mentioned the Gregorian, the Georgian chant
with 16 discretes, I think, and each of them have completely different story.
But this is
to get lost.
it is very interesting that when we talk about European tradition, we think about these temperate systems, but if we look at the folk music, then we have no temperate tradition. I don't know how. So in Ukraine, even in instrumental music, so definitely there is in among Gurale, even in instrumental music, there are tendency to use this, like the neutral third, like when you have something in between minor and major third. And we have a lot of these examples of the smaller kind of division than the tone of half tones in many like folk traditions that are not directly associated with melismatics and microtonality. So when we talk about Balkan music tradition, definitely, there are a lot of melismatics. But when we talk about Polish, Ukrainian, or Lithuanian, no, definitely everything is temperate. But when you start to listen to it, then you found out, no, it's not temperate. It's you have all this microtonality too. And what is also very interesting, that in if we talk about folk music, so you could find a lot of these very interesting things even on European ground. And definitely I was very interested in musical tradition outside of Europe, but I don't want to include it here because, like, I'm interested in it, but I definitely not an expert in it. And So because of and also because I was focused here on the classical Western music tradition, so I limited to this. But when we talk about folk music tradition, it's also what was interesting for me. I don't know how. So I mentioned on somewhere on the beginning of the lecture these instruments with wind capsule. So I don't know how about Poland, but in northern part of Ukraine, there are still in folk tradition some. They look exactly like the small, very small sham with wind capsule. So it's of course it's almost died this tradition, but there are still some folk instruments with this wind capsule. And it is very interesting that in folk music we could find a lot of relics of this professional music tradition, which like go out of favor in professional music and somehow landed in folk music. And it's like if we talk about Ukrainian folk music, there are so this is fantastic for me. The instrument, maybe you know that the very like typical iconic instruments of Ukrainian folk tradition is a bandura, this plucked string instrument. But there was a version of the instruments. So the bandura was an instrument for epic songs. The simple version of the instruments called kobza was for dances and popular music. And there was a kind of instrument which was popular among aristocracy, what we call the Schlachta, and these instruments, this kind of bandura was called a torban. But when you look when you look at torban, you see that this is the same instruments as teorba, which just stuck for a few centuries in folk tradition in Ukraine. And so it was still vivid in 19th century. So many people, even among artists, there was in mid of 19th century, there was like very popular to play on this instrument. It's in this movement for being close to people, to nation, and for example, one of the famous poets from 19th century Ukrainian poet Taras Shevchenko, he played on torban, and it was like, wow, he played on this very ancient Ukrainian instrument. And when you go to this instrument, you find, wow, this was like typical for the whole Europe instrument, professional instrument from Renaissance epoch. So there are a lot of these interesting connections between like professional and folk tradition.
Do you think like some of those discoveries you described in your lecture were like influenced by things people might have heard from outside of Europe, like from global majority culture?
Well, somehow yes, because even if those composers they built this enharmonic system based on ancient Greek tradition, means...
Audio access tutaj, tak?
Tak, właśnie kończymy wykład, ale zapraszamy. Na ostatnie 5 minut mam, może sprawdzić. Dziwne wyjście, nie? No to ciekawe. I wyszedł, zapytał czy może ma zanotowane, żeby tam nie wchodzić właśnie. Przed sprawdzić na wszelki wypadek. A to tutaj, dobra. Z nogi.
So when we go to this ancient Greek tradition, we perceive it like the Western tradition, but in fact, so it's a modern construct ancient Greece as something very relative to Western tradition. So in fact, the same what we have with this makoms. So the musical system, the system of fine arts and so on, that was very influential in the Northern Africa, and all the inputs from Northern Africa, from Middle East, they, like the Greece collected all these things, and and I think it even if we look at that, we have this outside of the Europe influence, which goes through this reference to ancient Greek tradition. And I don't know. Also, if we talk about instruments, for example, like if we talk about string instruments and bowed string instruments. There was instruments, so there was no bowed string instruments in ancient Greece. There was no bowed string instruments in early medieval times, and suddenly they appear in 9th century. And this appearance of bow instruments, bowed string instruments, they are very related to Mongols going on to power, and in Mongols they have this one of the very first example of the bowed string instrument, which called morinkur, where all parts of the instruments were created from different parts of horse, because horse was a sacred animal, and merchants in 9th century bring these bow string instruments to Middle East and also to Byzantium, and we have suddenly in 9th century we have the bowed, like the rebab kind of or rebek kind of instrument depicted on the frescoes in 9th century. And suddenly in 10th century you have everywhere in Europe, which was in the sphere of influence by Byzantium, so in Italy, in Balkans, also in Ukraine, in all churches suddenly appear the frescoes of musicians played on this bowed instrument.
Well, I have a question about different form of polyphony arising from different regions, not only in Europe, but I was shocked in many places, visiting Crete, visiting different regions, and then suddenly I was finding very similar forms, but then inside they were a little bit different. So, for example, when I choir music, are starting on unisono in Skopje, for example, and then they go to parallel, but not precisely parallel melismats. Okay, and then I'm finishing on the one note, which is quite common in many traditions. So the difference is inside. So that was my discovery in Georgia. I cannot find this group, the male group, 16 guys, and they are moving from one tuning to another one, and they are so in tune, but with different tuning, that I couldn't believe how it's possible. So I was asking the former rector of the Tbilisi Conservatory about this, and he sent me some spectral, the analysis. I said, well, Reza, this is not what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to find either the notation, there's no notation, okay, or another explanation. Then recently I get somebody who was explaining that those retuning are a little bit like ornaments in Baroque music. So you have some signs, and those are those small signs. Either they are interpreted or not. So that's free. You are inside a small range. You can move up and down. Not necessary. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And then, but in Georgia, they're so large and completely. Well, maybe I'm wrong. But because when I compare our Highlander music from Carpathia, whole Carpathia, and the music from Kashubia or other things, they are different, of course. But in fact, returning to this point, we don't have any reference to, I don't know, Perotinus and Leoninus. But in Georgia, you can listen those parallel fourth and fifth. So how it's possible? Because when there is a monodia is everywhere. Okay, this is also another story. It's like Gregorian choir a little bit from our perspective. Yes.
Yes, but
Traditional Korean music, traditional Chinese music, of course, is different. But when you land it on Beijing Opera, that's another crazy story. no, but if you are so much deep, because I'm not a specialist, but I listen a lot of music and then I'm shocking. I'm somewhere else, and then he said, whoa, what is the group? Is it from Poland or from the? No, this is local. Yeah. Another local, which is reminding things which are quite far from the origin. This is not the neighbor.
But sometimes it, like with these bowed strings instruments, it might be also the influence which were bring by some merchants.
Okay.
Many centuries ago, and
troubadours, maybe. Yeah, well, but that's another speculation.
But definitely, if we talk about the old world. So the traditions were mixed here and were circulated
when you show us, I don't know whether you are okay with this question, but when you show us the song with the small organ, and then I would need to know what is the tuning, because this is the either sheets. Średniotonowy, or I think that's quite a point, to know exactly what is the frequency, what is the relation between those intervals, other they are melismat or really fixed tuning. That's for me quite important, because sometimes I feel that in the folk music, in a different ethnical tradition, there are just melismat ornaments, and they are finishing together, so unison. So in fact, it's like. But sometimes they are moving together in this kind of strange tuning, and it's so mysterious that it goes like this. And I was talking with Tamar Putkanat from Tbilisi, also a singer, composer, about this, and I said, well, is it possible that each member of the group belongs to different regions? That's why in this concert they are playing 16 different songs, completely different from different tradition. And she said, yes, that's what is going on. It's like a circulation. They are moving, they are collecting other members, and then the whole group is moving and staying like 2 months. That's also quite interesting. I don't think that we have similar like this in Poland. No. Just here, a little bit isolated. And then we have people which are referring to this. We have many musicians which are reconstructing this. And it's also present in the contemporary, in a way of extended vocal techniques. Many composers too now. They are trying to follow this. To mix it up. Adam Struk, for example, that's one of them. Talking with him a lot.
There's also like you mentioned chromatism in case of Gesualdo and similar music. Like I listened to quite a lot of it, and for me they sound like totally normal. I need to
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
that they are like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
different in order to even notice it, because like they are very familiar nowadays.
Yeah.
Because also there's like a lot of similar ideas in like modern heavy rock music
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I think in general the old development now goes through experiments,
Yeah.
and they were called different, but they were experiments. They were always experimenting. That's my fault. It's a matter of this. Either you are conservative and you are protecting the system, which is current system, okay, all over the world, or you are moving out of the system. And I think that most of the big composers were just breaking the rules, okay,
Yeah.
through experiments.
Are there other examples of graphic music notation than Cordier?
Yeah, so there are, if you look at the internet at the Ars Subtilior, then you could how to Ars Subtilior. So it even showed this. So just even if you Google the Ars Subtilior, it immediately show you the different kind of graphic scores.
Już jest następna grupa, która tutaj wejdzie. Za chwileczkę będziemy powolutku.
Could you please show us
Próby
the
zaczną
first
kwartet.
slide, the one with quotes from your following comment? I would like to
Yes.
write it down if you
Uh-huh.
don't mind. Thank you.
Yes.
Streaming and being joined.
Ostap, bo Ostap jest tutaj od początku festiwalu. Do kiedy jesteś?
Do niedzieli.
No to w ogóle mamy kontakt z nim. Będziemy się dalej z nim spotykać we czwartek, piątek, sobota, także.
Thank you.
Czy ty na przykład możesz mi to przesłać w PDF, bo to jest takie najszybsze i najprostsze. To w tym naszym festiwalowym archiwum ja zbieram. No i leci teraz transmisja, także też będziecie Państwo mieli to za chwileczkę na stronie, będzie można tego posłuchać, ale optymalnie przy takich konferencjach to jest dostać jakąś prezentację, bo wtedy...
To fajnie, to będzie, będę miał dla raportu, bo...
To jest
tak, bo przejechałem dzięki wsparciu tego programu House of Europe.
Dlatego Cię prosiłem o tych sponsorów, o te linki, wiesz, bo to potem jest też tam i tu, i tam, i tu. Ja do swoich trójki studentów mówię to samo, co powiedziałem tydzień temu. To znaczy, że zapraszamy serdecznie. Jutro dość ostry maraton. Dzielimy salę audiowizualną na dwie części, bo tam jest taka ścianka ukryta i to wreszcie mam okazję, żeby ją zamknąć nagle. Ta sala będzie troszeczkę mniejsza, ale będzie bardziej kwadratowa. A do oktofonii właśnie czegoś takiego potrzebujemy. Więc to jest też taki ciekawy. Jak przyjdziecie, to się zorientujecie, o co chodzi. Cztery pierwsze koncerty są za 40 zł, bo u nas dychę kosztuje koncert, taka jest tam maksymalny dumping cenowy robimy, a potem jak przed pierwszym koncertem ogłoszę, że już są za darmo. Wiecie, że jest wejście na cały blok, ale po czwartym, i wtedy będzie takie rozluźnienie, że każdy sobie będzie mógł wyjść i wrócić, nikt nie będzie musiał mieć tasiemki, bo jest za darmo, więc spoko. Ale zapraszam, bo ja jestem dalej potwornie zmęczony, ale w takim samym stopniu jestem zafascynowany tym, co się wydarzyło. Benoît Maubré i Dimitris Salonik, po prostu paralelne performanse w tym samym miejscu w ogóle występowali. Robili prawie podobne rzeczy, a tak zupełnie skrajnie różne, nie?
Tak, znaczy ja myślałem o całej, tu mówiłeś o tej osobności tych artystów, ale zarazem jest pewna tradycja, gdzie właśnie ludzie robią tego.
No tak, ale to jest jakby wyjaśnienie, wiesz, że nie ma tej tendencji w tym kierunku, żeby to ujednolicić, czy nie ma wspólnych modeli za bardzo, ale i tak je znajdziesz, bo ja od początku istnienia tego festiwalu mówiłem, że festiwal nie tylko dotyczy audioartu. Ja mówiłem, że to nie będzie getto dla audioartu, że nie będziemy temu wierni, wiesz, chcemy kontekst pokazać, czyli ładujemy się z tym audioartem do głównego nurtu muzycznego i ona tam zostaje. I jest też akustyczny właśnie ten maraton, to jest, ale głównym nurtem płynie sounda. Ale to też muszę powiedzieć, bo ja zauważyłem, że coraz więcej tych obiektów dziwnych rzeźb dźwiękowych ładuje się na partyturę.
Bieber, tak, Bieber. Tylko nie Justin Bieber, a Heinrich Bieber, tak.
Tak, czytałem o nim, że to było w sumie, to był taki żart.
Że musimy się wynieść teraz.
No, nie zupełnie, bo jeżeli popatrzymy na twórczość Heinricha Biebera, to widzimy dużo utworów, gdzie wykorzystuje właśnie najróżniejsze skordatury, bardzo dysonansowe, jakieś takie elementy tkanki i no, nawet jest taka rzecz, że na przykład teraz nie pamiętam chyba jakaś sonata skrzypcowa jego nie jest wykonywana, dlatego że on wykorzystywał taki typ skordatury,